Hi, my name's Alex with Hyatt's All Things Creative. Today we are demoing the Daniel Smith Extra Fine Watercolor Dot Sample Card. In particular, the Brenda Swenson palette. These are highly pigmented, professional grade watercolors, great for layering and washes. To start, we have some cold pressed watercolor paper. These are single sheets, but a block would do you just as well. Next, we have our Daniel Smith Extra Fine Watercolor Dot Card Sample Palette. And finally, we have some synthetic blend watercolor brushes, a cup of water, and a paper towel. Now that we have everything together, let's get started on a painting. Alright, to start we're going to wet our paper a little bit. Today we're just drawing some spheres. This one's gonna be yellow, I think. So we're just gonna wet our paper just a little bit to get the water started being absorbed by our cold pressed watercolor paper. Again, we're using synthetic blend watercolor brushes. Very good, economically viable start for your watercolor paintings. Now we're just going to take a wet brush, not super drippy wet, and we're going to wet our palette. Whatever color you want to start with. I like starting with a little lighter color, and we can layer some darker stuff on top. So we're going to go in, lay down some color. I'm going to wet our brush again, get rid of some of the paint that's on it, and we're going to spread around some of the pigment that's already on the paper to get more tonal variations. You can really move around the paint once it's down on the paper, especially if you start off with a little bit of water already down. Alright, we've moved around the pigment quite a bit, and we're really starting to get some boundaries going. Now I did just take a simple 3H pencil, but you can use whatever you like, to draw some outlines, just so I know where I'm painting. Now we're going to clean our brush a little bit. This is watercolor, so just a cup of water will do. And we're going to put in some darker tones now. We're going to go with our quinacridone gold, the next shade up on our palette here. And we're going to put it in here in some of our darker areas that we want to make. We're going for a three-dimensional sphere. So it's going to be a little darker around the edges, depending on where your light source is. I've decided my light source is going to come from this top right corner. So we're going to put some darker tones in the bottom left of the sphere here. And again, just a little bit of water on your brush, not too crazy, and you can dip right into your paint. Now this quinacridone gold goes down a little brown, but as you work it out, you'll get that nice deep yellow color that blends really well with our Hansa yellow medium that we started with. I'm going to dry our brush a little bit as we go in to blend these colors and spread the pigment around a little bit more. It is okay if you go out of the lines a little bit. You can always just work that pigment around some more. Now that we have some quinacridone gold down, I'm going to give it a second to dry a little bit, and we're going to put down a little bit of a drop shadow here. So we're going to take some of the lunar black, bottom right corner of the palette here. We're just going to take a little bit, and we're going to start working that in. We're going to try not to have the pigments touch while they're drying to not get a lot of contamination between them. We can always go back in and touch it up if that does happen. We got a little bit of a drop shadow going now. We can go back in and really layer on that lunar black and spread it out some. So we're just going to drop it in there, and you see the pigment really going into the water now. It's spreading out on its own quite a bit. So we're going to go in with a pretty dry brush. It's still going to be a little bit moist. We're going to work that pigment in some more. We're going to go around and retouch up the shape. Now I think we're ready to add some more yellows to our sphere here. We're going to go in with our raw sienna light, so not quite a yellow, but another darker brown tone. And we're going to put it in with our, put it in to give more depth to the colors. We're going to put in our raw sienna light to really bring out some depth in our color here. We can go in with a couple different colors as well. I might include some of the burnt orange, the quinacridone burnt orange. I do have a swab of every color that I did previously in my little watercolor sketchbook. And again, you just take a little bit of water. These re-wet very well. You can really push around the pigment in the water to create whatever you like. Now that our drop shadow has dried a little bit, we're going to throw in some more lunar black to really add more depth. We're going to start as close to our sphere as we can. Push that pigment around. These dot sample cards work almost exactly like a pan of watercolor. So if you've used any pan watercolor sets in the past, you'll be very familiar because it works almost exactly the same way. We're going to go in and we're going to throw in a little bit of this scarlet color. Get a little crazy. Pushing around the pigment to really put it wherever we want. These colors layer really nicely. And you can see the scarlet is blending with our quinacridone gold and our Hansa yellow light to make a nice orange. Keeping our darker, richer tones towards the bottom. And we've got our little highlight area. we're not really touching much more of. We're going to go in and throw some of this quinacridone burnt orange into our drop shadow, just to get a little more color going. Now we're just going to wait a few minutes as our paint sets up and dries so we can layer more on top of it. Now that we've given our piece a little time to dry, we can go in with our final darker tones to really finish up this piece and make it pop. We're going to go in again, really put in our darker tones. At this point we can get right up to our sphere and really fill in that white bit. We're going to push our pigment around and give it a real nice gradient going out from our darkest portion of the piece. And we're going to do the same thing on our sphere. Going it just a little bit more black. We can even push around the pigment that we've already put down for our drop shadow. I'm going to go in one more time with another pass of the lunar black, just to really freshen up that border between the sphere and our shadow. I'm going to go in with a little bit of a smaller brush this time. This one is a round 2. I'm just going to go in and really touch up that line so we don't lose the bottom of our sphere. And we're just going to extend our shadow a little bit more, give the top of our sphere some depth. And there you have it, the basics to our Daniel Smith Extra Fine Watercolor dot card. Stay tuned for more demos with Hyatt's All Things Creative.